Chapter 17. The Last Trap. We moved back from the standing stones and regrouped at the edge of the clearing where the trees provided some cover. My heart was hammering and my hands were shaking, and I tried to focus on breathing, on staying calm, on not letting the heat in my chest spiral out of control. Lysandra was already pulling out a map and spreading it across a flat rock. "We need options," she said. "Routes out of here that won't lead us straight into their arms." "There aren't any," my mother said. "They've had time to position themselves. They'll have the main roads blocked and patrols on the secondary routes. So what do you suggest? We just sit here and wait for them to close in?" "No. I'm saying we need to think strategically instead of just running blindly." Atticus was scanning the tree line with his rifle raised and his expression was tense. "Movement at 2 o'clock, he said quietly. 3 contacts. Maybe 4. "They're not attacking yet," Naira said. She had her radio out and was cycling through frequencies, listening to the static and occasional bursts of coded communication. "They're setting up a perimeter." "For what?" Torin asked, and his voice was tight with fear. "For containment," my mother said. "They're not trying to kill Elijah. They're trying to trap him." The words settled over the group like a weight, and I felt everyone's eyes turn toward me. "Why here?" I asked. "Why this specific location?" My mother looked at the standing stones and her expression was grim. "Because this is a convergence point. The energy here amplifies supernatural abilities. If you shift here, you'll be stronger than you've ever been." "That sounds like a good thing." "It would be if they weren't counting on it. They want you to shift. They want you at full power so they can test their containment technology against the strongest possible version of what you are." My stomach dropped. "They're using me as a test subject. They're using you as proof of concept. If they can contain a dragon at a convergence point, they can contain one anywhere." Lysandra swore under her breath. "So this whole thing is a setup. They let us escape the facility, let us run here, knowing we'd come to one of these convergence points eventually." "Maybe," my mother said. "Or maybe they just adapted their plan when they realized where we were heading." "Does it matter?" Atticus asked. "Either way, we're exactly where they want us." The radio crackled again and a voice came through, clear and professional and completely devoid of emotion. "Attention occupants of the Northern Convergence Site. You are surrounded. We have no desire for unnecessary casualties. Surrender the dragon and the rest of you will be allowed to leave unharmed." Nobody moved. "You have 10 minutes to comply." The radio went silent and the forest around us was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the trees and the distant call of a bird that didn't know it was flying over a battlefield. "We could run," Torin said quietly. "Try to break through their perimeter before they're fully set up." "We'd never make it," Naira said. "They've got at least 20 people out there, probably more. And they'll have vehicles positioned to cut off any escape routes. So what do we do?" Nobody answered because nobody had a good answer. I looked at the standing stones and tried to imagine what would happen if I shifted here. If I let the dragon out in a place where the energy was amplified and concentrated, would I be able to control it? Would I even want to? Or would I just become the thing they were afraid of? The thing they'd been hunting for centuries? "There's another option," I said. And my voice came out steadier than I expected. Everyone looked at me. "I could leave. Not just this clearing. The whole region. If I'm not here, they have no reason to hurt any of you." "That's not an option," Atticus said immediately. "Why not?" "It makes sense. They want me, not you. If I'm gone, this ends." "It doesn't end," my mother said. "They'll just keep hunting you. And eventually they'll find you again and you'll be alone with no allies and no support. Better than getting all of you killed." "That's not your decision to make," Lysandra said, and her tone was sharp. "We chose to help you. We knew the risks. You didn't know they'd bring an army." "We knew enough." I wanted to argue, but I could see the determination in her expression. Could see that she wasn't going to change her mind. The sound of engines echoed through the forest and I turned to see lights moving between the trees. Could see vehicles positioning themselves at what looked like strategic points around the clearing. "They're setting up," Naira said. "Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon." My mother walked over to the nearest standing stone and placed her hand against the carved symbols. Her expression was distant and sad. "These stones were placed here by dragons," she said quietly. "Centuries ago, when they still believed they could maintain balance. When they still thought their power could be used for protection instead of destruction." "What happened to them?" I asked. "They forgot. Or they stopped caring. Or they just got tired of trying to hold back the inevitable." She turned to face me and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "You have a choice, Elijah. You can run and spend the rest of your life hiding. Or you can stand here and fight for the right to exist without apology. That's not a choice. That's just 2 different ways of dying. Maybe, but one of them means something." The radio crackled again. 5 minutes. I looked around at the group and tried to memorize their faces, tried to hold on to this moment before everything changed. Atticus with his rifle and his steady presence. Lysandra with her tactical mind and her sharp edges. Torin looking scared but determined. Naira with her radio and her constant vigilance. Maria and Rowan somewhere in the forest providing overwatch. And my mother, who'd spent decades planning for this moment, who'd manipulated and lied and sacrificed everything to give me a chance at survival. And Calder, standing apart from the group with his arms crossed and his expression conflicted. He was leaning against one of the standing stones and the moonlight caught the side of his face in a way that made him look older than he was, tired, like he hadn't slept in days and maybe hadn't wanted to. I walked over to him because I could not walk over to him, because something in his posture was screaming that he had something to say and if I didn't give him the chance now I might never get another one. He looked up when I approached and his eyes were different than I'd ever seen them. Not guarded or calculating or distant. Just raw. "You've been quiet," I said. "I've been thinking." "About what?" The wind picked up and carried the smell of pine and damp earth and something metallic that might have been the hunter's equipment or might have been my own fear. Calder's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to swallow. "About how I got here," he said finally. His voice was rough and low and I had to lean closer to hear him over the sound of engines in the distance. "About the choices I made." "What choices?" He pushed off from the stone and took a few steps away from me. Then stopped. His shoulders were tense and his hands were clenched at his sides and I could see the muscles in his neck standing out like cables. "They recruited me 3 years ago," he said. And he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the forest beyond the clearing, at the lights moving between the trees. The Iron Ring. "They approached me after I'd had a run-in with a rogue werewolf that killed 2 people in my hometown." My chest went cold and tight and I felt the heat starting to build there. Felt my body preparing for something I wasn't sure I wanted to do. "You're one of them." I was. He turned back to face me and his expression was anguished. "Maybe I still am. I don't know anymore." Behind us I could hear the others shifting. Could feel their attention focusing on this conversation even though they were pretending not to listen. Atticus had gone very still and Lysandra's hand had moved to her weapon and Torin was staring at Calder with an expression that was somewhere between shock and fury. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Because you deserve to know." He took a breath and it sounded ragged, like his lungs weren't working right. "Because I'm tired of lying. Because if I don't tell you now I never will and you'll die thinking everyone around you is honest except the one person who should have been." The words hit me like a physical thing and I had to take a step back to process them. "How long have you been lying?" "Since the beginning. Since before you even knew what you were." "The facility, yes. The ambush at the warehouse, yes. Every time we ran and they found us anyway. Yes." My hands were shaking and I shoved them in my pockets because I didn't want him to see, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much this was affecting me. But I could feel the heat building in my chest and spreading through my arms and legs and I knew he could see it in my eyes, could see the way my pupils were probably starting to glow with that amber light that meant I was losing control. "Why?" The word came out harsh and broken. "Why would you do that?" He looked at me and his eyes were full of something that might have been guilt or regret or self-hatred or all three at once. "They told me dragons were too dangerous to exist," he said quietly. "That they'd caused wars and killed thousands and that the only way to protect people was to make sure they never came back. And I believed them." "Just like that? They told you and you believed them?" "No. Not just like that." He ran a hand through his hair and I could see it was shaking. "They showed me things. Records, photographs, entire towns burned to the ground. Bodies that had been torn apart or incinerated or crushed. They showed me what happened the last time a dragon lost control and I looked at those images and I thought, this can't happen again. I can't let this happen again. So you decided to help them hunt me." "I decided to help them prevent another catastrophe." His voice was rising now and there was desperation in it, like he needed me to understand even though he knew I probably never would. "I thought I was saving people. I thought I was doing the right thing. By betraying me. By stopping you before you could become what they were." The heat in my chest flared and I felt my hands start to change, felt the bones shifting and the skin stretching and I had to close my eyes and breathe and force it back down because if I shifted now I would prove him right, would prove that I was exactly the thing he'd been afraid of. When I opened my eyes again he was watching me with an expression that was equal parts fear and sadness. "I wanted to believe them," he said, and his voice was quieter now. Softer. "I wanted to believe that the world made sense, that there were good guys and bad guys and I was on the right side. That if I just followed orders and did what they told me to do, people would be safe. And now? Now I realize they don't want to contain you. They want to eliminate you, permanently. And they're willing to kill everyone here to make that happen." He looked away and his jaw clenched and when he spoke again his voice was barely above a whisper. The words settled over the clearing like ash and I could feel everyone's attention sharpening. Could feel the weight of what he'd just admitted pressing down on all of us. "How do you know?" Lysandra asked, and her voice was cold and hard. Calder turned to face her and I could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. "Because I've been listening to their communications. Because I've seen the orders they're sending out. They're not talking about capture anymore. They're talking about elimination. About making sure there's no chance of the dragon line continuing." "They told you this?" Not directly, but I know how to read between the lines. I know what it means when they start talking about acceptable casualties and collateral damage and final solutions. My stomach turned over and I tasted bile in the back of my throat. When did you figure this out? 2 days ago. Maybe 3. I don't know anymore. Time's been strange. And you didn't think to mention it? I didn't know how. He looked at me and his eyes were pleading. I didn't know how to tell you that I'd been lying to you from the beginning. That every time you trusted me I was reporting back to them. That every safe house we found, every route we took, every plan we made, I was feeding it all back to the people who want you dead. You've been feeding them information this whole time. Yes. The word hung in the air and I felt something break inside me, felt whatever small piece of trust I'd been holding on to shatter into fragments that I'd never be able to put back together. You told them where we were going. You told them about the convergence points. Yes. You led them right to us. Yes. I wanted to hit him. Wanted to shift and burn him and make him pay for every person who died because of his betrayal. Wanted to make him feel even a fraction of the pain and fear and confusion that had been eating at me since the moment I'd discovered what I was. But I could see the pain in his expression. Could see that he was already punishing himself more than I ever could. Could see that whatever he'd done, whatever choices he'd made, he was drowning in the weight of them now. There was this moment, he said, and his voice was distant like he was talking to himself more than to me. About a week ago, we were at that warehouse and you shifted to protect Torin and I watched you hold back. Watched you choose not to kill when you easily could have. And I thought, that's not what they told me. That's not what a monster does. He looked at me and his eyes were wet. And then at the facility when you could have left us all behind but you came back. When you risked everything to make sure we got out. And I started thinking, maybe they were wrong. Maybe everything they told me was based on fear instead of fact. That doesn't change what you did. I know. His voice broke on the words. I know it doesn't. I know there's nothing I can say that will make this okay. But I'm telling you now because you need to know what you're walking into. What am I walking into? A trap. They have containment technology set up around this clearing. Specialized equipment designed to suppress supernatural abilities. If you shift here, they'll activate it and you'll be trapped. My blood went cold. How do you know? Because I helped them plan it. The admission hit me like a physical blow and I had to take a step back to steady myself. Behind me I heard Atticus swear and Lysandra's weapon click as she raised it and Torin make a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. You helped them. I thought I was saving people. His voice was desperate now. Pleading. I thought I was preventing another war. I thought if we could just contain you, study you, understand what you were, maybe we could prevent the kind of catastrophe that happened before. You were helping them build a cage. Yes. The word was barely audible and I could see his hands shaking. Could see the way his whole body was trembling like he was about to collapse. When did you realize? I asked. When did you realize they weren't trying to contain me? That they were trying to kill me? He was quiet for a long moment and when he spoke his voice was hollow. Yesterday. When I heard them talking about the convergence point. About how they were going to use it to amplify your abilities and then activate the containment field at maximum strength. So the containment field at maximum strength doesn't suppress abilities. It burns them out. Permanently. It would kill you, Elijah. Slowly and painfully and there would be nothing anyone could do to stop it. The clearing went silent except for the sound of wind in the trees and the distant rumble of engines and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. They told me it was just containment, he continued, and his voice was shaking. They told me it was humane. That you'd be kept comfortable and safe and studied and eventually released if you proved you weren't a threat. But yesterday I saw the actual specifications and I realized they'd been lying to me the whole time. The equipment they're bringing isn't designed to contain. It's designed to execute. And you're just telling me this now? I didn't know how to tell you before. I didn't know if you'd believe me. I didn't know if I even deserved the chance to warn you after everything I'd done. I looked at him and tried to find anger. Tried to hold on to the rage that had been building in my chest since the moment he'd admitted his betrayal. But all I could feel was exhaustion and sadness and a bone-deep weariness that made me want to lie down and never get up again. Why should I believe you now? I asked. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to listen and make your own choice about what to do next. He took a step closer and I could see the tears on his face now. Could see the way his whole body was shaking with the effort of holding himself together. I was wrong, he said, and his voice broke on the words. About you. About what you are. About everything they told me. I watched you fight and I watched you protect people and I watched you choose mercy when you could have chosen violence and I realized that everything I believed was a lie. That doesn't change what you did. I know. And I'll have to live with that. But I'm telling you now because you need to know what you're walking into. Because if you shift here, if you let them activate that equipment, you'll die. And everyone who's tried to protect you will have died for nothing. The radio crackled. 2 minutes. I looked at Calder and at the standing stones and at the lights moving through the forest, and I tried to figure out what I was supposed to do with this information, with this confession, with the knowledge that someone I'd started to trust had been betraying me from the beginning. My mother was watching us and her expression was unreadable. Atticus had lowered his rifle but his finger was still on the trigger. Lysandra looked like she wanted to shoot Calder herself. Torin was crying quietly and Naira was staring at her radio like it might have answers. "What do you want from me?" I asked Calder. "Nothing. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know the truth before it was too late." "And what are you going to do now?" He looked at me and his expression was lost and broken and completely without hope. "I don't know. Whatever you tell me to do, I guess. Or nothing. Maybe nothing would be better. You could run. Get out of here before they realize you've switched sides." "I'm not running. I've been running from the truth for 3 years and I'm done. Whatever happens next, I'm staying. Even if it gets you killed? Especially if it gets me killed. Maybe that's what I deserve." I wanted to argue with him. Wanted to tell him he was being stupid and dramatic and that running was the smart choice. But I could see in his eyes that he'd already made his decision. That whatever happened next he was going to face it instead of hiding from it. And maybe that was the only honest thing he'd done since I'd met him. "You've been feeding them information this whole time," I said again. And I needed to hear him say it one more time. Needed to make sure I understood exactly what he'd done. "Yes. You told them where we were going. You told them about the convergence points. Yes. You led them right to us. Yes." I wanted to hit him. Wanted to shift and burn him and make him pay for every person who died because of his betrayal. But I could see the pain in his expression. Could see that he was already punishing himself more than I ever could. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Why not just let them take me? Because I was wrong. About you. About what you are." He looked at the standing stones and his expression was haunted. "I've watched you fight. I've seen you hold back when you could have killed. I've seen you protect people who were trying to capture you. And I realized that everything they told me about dragons was based on fear, not fact. That doesn't change what you did. I know. And I'll have to live with that. But I'm telling you now because you need to know what you're walking into. They have containment technology set up around this clearing. Specialized equipment designed to suppress supernatural abilities. If you shift here, they'll activate it and you'll be trapped." "How do you know?" "Because I helped them plan it." The admission hit me like a physical blow and I had to take a step back to steady myself. "You helped them." "I thought I was saving people. I thought I was preventing another war." "You were helping them build a cage." "Yes." The radio crackled. 2 minutes. My mother was watching us and her expression was unreadable. "Is he telling the truth?" she asked. "I think so." "Then we need to decide what we're going to do. Right now." I looked at the standing stones and the forest beyond and the lights of the hunter vehicles moving into position. I thought about running. About trying to break through their perimeter and disappearing into the wilderness. But I was tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of letting fear dictate every choice I made. "I'm not leaving," I said. "Elijah," Atticus started. "I'm not leaving. They want a dragon? They want to test their containment technology? Fine. Let them try." "That's suicide," Lysandra said. "Maybe, but I'm done being hunted. I'm done letting them decide where I go and what I do and whether I get to exist." I walked toward the center of the clearing and the standing stones and I could feel the energy here. Could feel it humming in my bones and calling to something deep inside me. The heat in my chest was building and I didn't try to stop it, didn't try to push it down or control it. I just let it rise and spread and fill every part of me. Behind me I heard footsteps and voices but I didn't turn around, didn't look back. The radio crackled one last time. "Time's up. All units move in." The forest erupted with movement and I could see figures emerging from the trees. Could see them carrying equipment and weapons and moving with military precision. They formed a circle around the clearing and I counted at least 30 of them, maybe more. They were wearing tactical gear and helmets and they moved like they'd done this before, like they'd trained for exactly this scenario. One of them stepped forward and removed his helmet and I recognized him from the facility. Recognized the cold professional expression and the way he held himself. "Elijah," he said, and his voice was calm and measured. "You don't have to do this. Come with us peacefully and nobody gets hurt. You're going to hurt me either way. We're going to study you. Learn from you. Make sure that what happened with the old dragons never happens again. By putting me in a cage. By making sure you can't become a threat." I looked at him and at the circle of hunters and at the equipment they were setting up around the perimeter. I could see the devices now. Could see the way they were positioned to create some kind of field or barrier. Containment technology. Calder had been telling the truth. "What if I don't want to be contained?" I asked. "Then we'll have to use force. And people will die. Is that what you want?" I thought about the question and realized I didn't have a good answer. I didn't want people to die. Didn't want to be responsible for more death and destruction. But I also didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a cage being studied like a specimen. The heat in my chest was almost unbearable now and I could feel my body starting to change. could feel the bones shifting and the skin stretching and the wings trying to emerge. "Last chance," the hunter said. I looked back at my mother and Atticus and Lysandra and the others. They were watching me with expressions that ranged from fear to determination to something that might have been pride. And I realized that whatever happened next, I wasn't alone. I had people who were willing to stand with me, who were willing to fight for me even when it would be easier to walk away. That had to mean something. I turned back to the hunter and let the heat rise and spread and consume me. Let the transformation start and didn't try to stop it. My spine cracked and reformed and my hands became claws and my skin split and healed and split again. Wings erupted from my back and my vision sharpened and the world became clearer and brighter and more intense than it had ever been. The hunters activated their equipment and I felt something press against me, felt some kind of field or barrier trying to contain the energy, trying to suppress what I was becoming. But the convergence point was stronger. The ancient power that had been concentrated here for centuries was feeding into me, was amplifying everything I was and everything I could be. The containment field flickered and failed. I spread my wings and felt the wind catch them, felt the power and the freedom and the terrible responsibility of what I'd become. The hunter was backing away now and his expression had changed from professional calm to something closer to fear. I looked at him and at the circle of hunters and at the equipment that was supposed to contain me but couldn't. And I said quietly, my voice deeper and rougher but still recognizably mine. "If they want a dragon, they're about to meet one."